Okay, now we're live. Hey, everybody. Sorry about that. I had some technical difficulties on our end, but had to restart the stream. So I'm sure, get a bunch of people back on here in just a minute. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I'm coming to you from the old city of Jerusalem, or just outside of it. It's right over there. And it is about 8:53, almost 9 p.m. Here in Israel. So I'm going to be talking to you about terrible tragedy that happened in Gaza overnight. I was very sad. Big ambush and killed some IDF soldiers. The IDF's been having a tough couple of weeks. As a matter of fact, about a week ago, a little more than a week ago, they had 7 soldiers killed in another kind of ambush. They were in their armored vehicle and had the hatch open, and a terrorist ran up and threw a big satchel charge into the hatch and blew up the vehicle and killed all 7 of those guys. Uh, some people have asked, like, why in the world would they have had the hatch open of that thing? Well, if you've never ridden in an armored vehicle in June in southern Israel, I can tell you they are not comfortable. Super hot, very bad air conditioning if they have any at all, and so it's not surprising that they had the hatch open because they were trying to be able to breathe, and they were in an area that was a fairly good distance away from buildings and things like that. So it wasn't like a guy could just pop out of a building and drop a bunch of, drop a grenade in their hatch. This guy actually had to run across about 40 yards of open ground. Now it was uh, pretty churned up, and so there were berms and things like that in the way. And so even if they had been watching out of the armored vehicle, they wouldn't have been able to see the guy the entire time, but they would have seen him because he had to run kind of zigzag up there, jumped right up on top of the armored vehicle and dropped that grenade right in the top. Very unfortunate series of events. Yesterday, what happened, or I guess it was early this morning, is a platoon of IDF was on a patrol. They were patrolling on foot in Bet Hanun, which is not far from the border, the northern border of Gaza. It's in an area that's supposed to be completely cleared out of people. So pretty much anybody that they see in Beit Hanun is considered to be a target, right? But this one was, Rubina, can you ask Grace or to see if Jen or somebody can set up the live after this one? So in about, I don't know, about 1:30 Panama time, something like that, set up the live on my channel. So, folks, what we're doing here, because I'm trying to do lives on both CBNs and my own channel every night, is I'm encouraging you to ask your questions in the chat as we're going through this live. And then we're going to make a list of all those questions. And then when this live is over in about half an hour, we'll go over to my channel and I'll answer all your questions over there. And we can have more of a talk about it. So, like I said, I'm coming in from right near the old city of Jerusalem. I'd like to know where you're watching from. So if you haven't already, please do me a favor and uh, go post in the chat where you're watching from so we can see that, and make sure that you're liking the podcast as well, because that helps the algorithm know more people need to be watching this. Okay. So, terrible tragedy happened in Gaza overnight. 5 IDF troops killed, and they're on the thumbnail of this video if you want to see their pictures. They have released their names, and very sad. What happened was they were patrolling on foot and just walked right into an ambush. There were improvised explosive devices buried on the sides of the road, maybe even under the road. This is not a paved road by any stretch. The road that we're talking about is everything in there is dirt at this point. So that makes it easy for them to bury these improvised explosive devices. And they just waited until the squad got right into the middle of it and popped that thing off. So a very sad day. Now, obviously, the IDF has lost more than 400 soldiers since the invasion of Gaza began. They've lost more than 400 troops in Gaza. Of course, they lost 1,200 people on October 7th, and over 300 of those were soldiers as well. So that brings the total death toll for the military of the IDF to more than 700 in this war. So obviously, you look at it now, they've got 20 living hostages left. And of course, everybody wants to get them out. They want them to get out. Every one of those hostages that's there now is male and is an IDF soldier. So there are 20 IDF troops in Gaza right now that are being held hostage. And just think about this. 700 people, well, let's say those that went into Gaza to try to get the hostages out, of those, more than 400 of them have given their lives to try to rescue what's remaining of their hostages. And you might say that the math just doesn't add up on that it would be less costly for Israel if they just said, keep those guys. But that's just not how it works in the military. We never leave a man behind. And the IDF is no different. They won't leave a person behind. And every one of those soldiers that gave their lives did so knowing that that might happen, and went into Gaza hoping to get their brethren back. Now, as Prime Minister Netanyahu has gone to Washington, D.C., last night he met with President Trump. They had dinner. There was one point in the dinner where they brought press in and took some questions and that sort of thing. And that went well. The first thing that happened was Prime Minister Netanyahu gave President Trump a letter that he had sent to the Nobel Prize Committee nominating President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize, which is what President Trump really wants. He really wants to add that to his list of accomplishments and get a Nobel Peace Prize. So he's they're sitting in this dinner. They're asking President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu about the substance of what they're going to be talking about when it comes to ending the war, getting a ceasefire, what they're going to do about Iran, and all that. So let's go through those things kind of line by line and talk about what they talked about in that briefing or in that conference. So, first of all, President Trump said, look, Iran is, they were decimated in the 12-day war, and they want to talk now. They're asking for peace talks. According to the interviews and speeches that have been given by the leadership of Iran, he's not wrong about that. They've been saying, "Oh yeah, we'd be happy to talk, as long as our rights are respected." And this is something that you got to read between the lines a little bit. When Iran says they want their rights to be respected in the peace talks, what they're actually talking about is They want, they believe that it is their right as a nation to enrich uranium and have a nuclear program. And so they're saying, yeah, we're willing to talk to have talks about fixing the relations between our countries, but you've got to allow us to have a nuclear program before we will talk to you about that. That's one of our conditions. We've got to have the ability to enrich uranium. Now, Tucker Carlson just went to, he just interviewed the president of Iran. He didn't go to Iran. He did it remotely. And some of you might have seen that video or some clips from the video. I'll just give you my thoughts on it very quickly. Number one, Tucker Carlson is giving a platform to a very evil regime, willingly understanding that the point of the interview was to improve Iran's stature, improve their image on the world stage. Carlson asked a bunch of softball questions, no follow-ups per se. Now, he probably had to get those questions approved beforehand, and so he was essentially given a script, but he's used to this. That's what he did when he interviewed Vladimir Putin. And so he's, sort of becoming known as the darling of our adversaries, because they know that they can get Tucker Carlson in there and he'll ask all the right questions, give them an opportunity to put out their carefully spun answers, and improve actually not just improve their own image, but increase the divisions in the United States, drive a wedge between Americans by being able to do that. And Carlson makes lots of money. I guarantee you he makes lots of money doing that. I'm not saying he's being paid by Iran necessarily, but he is getting paid. There's no question about it. I mean, just the number of hits alone on those videos is hundreds of thousands of dollars in Tucker's pocket. Now, I'd like to know what you think about that. How does it make you feel when you see an American, ostensibly a conservative Christian commentator, interviewing the president of Iran and refusing? I don't have a problem with him interviewing him, because that's what journalists do. We interview people, and so you don't have to agree with the person that you're going to interview in order to interview him, obviously. So I don't have a problem with him interviewing the guy. My problem is that the interview was so scripted, and again, he didn't ask any follow-up questions. So he didn't ask anything like when the president of Iran said, name for me one American that was killed by an Iranian. Iranians have never killed an American citizen. Well, there's a lot. I mean, there's a long list. Hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans have been killed due to the Islamic regime of Iran, because they were funding and training and providing weaponry to our enemies in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. I know people who were struck by explosively formed penetrators in Iraq that were made in Iran and shipped into Iran and given to Al Qaeda in Iraq. So yes, Iran has killed lots of Americans, and we could go all the way back to. I mean, there's a long history of this. But Tucker Carlson didn't even bring that up when the president just said, "We've never, Iranians have never killed an American." Tucker Carlson just sort of nodded along and just went on to the next question. When they're talking about their nuclear program, the president of Iran is like, we have a right to, have a nuclear program for peaceful purposes, but we've never wanted our nuclear program to be for military purposes. Never. We've never, ever done that. And Carlson, the natural follow-up question would have been then, what about the 60% enriched uranium, the 900 pounds or so of it that you have hidden somewhere that you've spirited away? There is no civilian use for 60% uranium, 60% enriched uranium. And we know for a fact, because the IAEA found it in 2023, that they had some enriched uranium that was up to 85% enriched. That's only 5% short of weapons grade. And there is no legitimate reason for you to have that if you don't have a military grade weapons program, nuclear weapons program. But Carlson just skated right past that one. That was a layup. That was a gimme. He totally should have done that. Should have asked that question, but he didn't. So that's the problem I have with Carlson, giving a platform to these tyrants. Didn't ask him anything about the human rights abuses in Iran, about there, a lot of those things just went by the wayside. So President Trump said in the meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu at dinner last night that Iran is asking for talks. Now, again, what is there to talk about? Do they want to come up with a written contracted ceasefire? Because right now there's not actually a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. I mean, they're not currently shooting at each other, but there's no formal ceasefire in place. It's just being held together by literally the force of Donald Trump's will, which is something to be said for President Trump for sure, because he's done this all across the Middle East. We have an informal ceasefire in Lebanon between Israel and the ceasefire is actually between Israel and the Lebanese army and the Lebanese government and the United States. And Hezbollah isn't even part of that. But Hezbollah was hurt so badly by the Israeli attacks that they are going along with it. And they're really not in a position to attack Israel anymore. They're trying to get Israel to back off because Israel has been continuing to strike inside Lebanon for a long time. The SSB company says this guy sounds like a Christian propagandist. How so? How so? You talking about me? I'm a Christian propagandist? Explain what you mean by that. I'm waiting. Go ahead. I'll read your answer. We can talk about it. If you think I'm a propagandist, I'm standing in Israel telling you what's happening in Israel. Okay? This is one of the things that kind of bugs me about a lot of the pundits. Now, there was a great compilation of videos that was put out by Ben Shapiro earlier this week where he showed people like Tucker Carlson predicting that if Israel or the United States struck at Iran, that Israel would be destroyed and the United States would be dragged into World War III. And it wasn't just Tucker Carlson. It was a whole bunch of people that were making predictions like that, oh man, we have no idea what Iran can bring to the table militarily. They're the largest military in the Middle East. And so that, if the United States strikes at Iran, Americans will die. That's one of the things that Tucker Carlson said. Americans will die. Well, as it turned out, Americans didn't die. No American troops were harmed in the making of this war. There was a grand total of one night of fighting by the United States in the 12-day war between Israel and Iran. And we decimated large portions of Iran's nuclear capability. We proved the concept of the massive ordnance penetrator bombs that I noticed that SSB company he's gone now. I called him out. Hey man, you say I'm a propagandist, tell me why. And He's poof. See you later. I love these drive-by comments. People just come through and just take pot shots, but are not willing to back it up. You want to have a debate, man? Let's do it. So isn't it about time for Israel to finally act and not negotiate in Gaza, free all the hostages, and destroy Hamas? Well, uh, they are acting. There's no question about that. Now, I'm going to get to more of that in just a few minutes. I want to circle back around to the soldiers that died in Gaza last night and those that were wounded, because I want to tell you what they are saying. Those soldiers specifically, the ones that were wounded, are saying to Benjamin Netanyahu right now. And this is key. It's key. All right. So the United States did strike at Iran, and Iran basically could do nothing about it. We proved the concept that American, and then look, this is not just American technological superiority over Iranian technology. No. What we just proved was that American technology is better than Russian technology and Chinese technology as well, because there were both of those things in Iran during this conflict, especially their air defense things. Russia had transported their most high speed, low drag, newest high tech anti aircraft equipment into Iran and set it up and helped Iran figure out how to use it and all that. Specifically because I believe Russia wanted to know how it stacked up against Western equipment. And I think they were mighty disappointed, because those things all just spontaneously combusted on the first night of the war at the hands of, there's some strange drones and missiles and stuff coming in, right? So yeah, apparently SSB, you don't want to engage. I mean, come on. Are you saying I'm a Christian propagandist? What do you mean by that? Come on, let's hear what you got to say, man. Are you afraid to talk to me? You just one of those drive-by trolls? Is that what you are? So again, your questions here, if you have questions or comments or whatever you want me to talk about, put them in the chat right now. We're making a list of those things, and I'm going to get to those on my channel here in about 15 minutes. Okay. So we'll go over to, yeah, you just said it. You couldn't back it up, but you just said it. I got you. Okay. I mean, it's free country, man. You can say whatever you want. But I think everybody watching knows you can't back it up. So there you go. Now, Iran got the message when Israel, look, here's the final tally of this 12-day war. Iran fired 1,200 munitions at Israel. 1,200, 1,200 missiles and drones. Of those, only about 40 something, 40 couple actually made it through the Iron Dome system and actually made it and struck something inside Israel. Only about half of those actually struck anything of consequence. They were all civilian targets. There was the only legitimate target that you could theoretically call legitimate was they struck the kind of headquarters building in Tel Aviv. But that's it. I mean, they struck the Soroka Hospital, they struck schools, they struck a mosque in Haifa. They struck all over the place. All civilian, just aiming at civilian targets. Out of 1,200 munitions, there were 28 people killed inside Israel in that in that conflict. 28 people. Now, the death toll the official death toll out of Iran is somewhere around 900 people that died. It likely could be higher than that, but in reality, Israel was warning the Iranians to get out of the way before they bomb things, and they were only bombing military targets, legitimate military targets, whether those were underground bunkers or nuclear facilities or military bases or things like that. The only target that you could argue about and say that maybe that wasn't quite a military target was they hit the national television station in downtown Tehran. But I think you could make an argument that that was one way that the Iranian military and government was getting their propaganda out. And so, look, the information battle space is every bit as important as the kinetic battle space, without a doubt. All right. So Mac Bolan, Chuck Holton bench presses Chuck Norris while he's bench pressing the earth. I love your handle there. Mac Bolan was one of my favorite book series when I was a kid, and I probably shouldn't have been reading the Executioner series about the Mac Bolan was a fictional Vietnam veteran who came back and took on the mafia and went around and just took matters into his own hands, vigilante justice, and killed mafiosos all around the globe. And there were like 150 of those novels, and I read every single one of them multiple times. It made me want to join the military and go be a mercenary for God, so to speak. Little did I know how God would use that desire to help me gain the experience I needed to report on wars and disasters around the world for more than 20 years now. All right. So Iran expended billions of dollars in this 12-day war. And they did all of that to kill 29 civilians. There was one IDF soldier killed, but he was at home with his family. He was not on duty. So I would count him as a civilian as well. They spent billions of dollars. And now on the other side, the Israelis dropped thousands of munitions. They also had about 2,000 sorties. One sortie can drop multiple munitions. So virtually every single one of their munitions hit their targets. And they did extensive damage to the Iranian regime, the Iranian nuclear program, and the Iranian military in that time. So the score is not even close. We're talking about, if this was a basketball game, it would have been, 300 to 20 or something. I mean, it just not even close. I think I'm getting the feeling that SSB Company doesn't like the fact that I've criticized Tucker Carlson. Look, I used to watch Tucker Carlson a lot. I think he was great when he worked for Fox, but here's what I learned, because I got kind of the background knowledge on Fox News since I worked for Fox News for some time, and that is he had a good script writer when he was at Fox News. Now he's kind of thrown the ball over the fence, and I wouldn't say he's got that same script writer anymore. So isn't Israel pushing the brakes too much? Now, again, Martina, I'm going to answer that. That's a longer answer, so I'm going to answer that on my live here in about 8 minutes. Okay. So I'm hoping that live is set up now. Is my one of my moderators needed to go set that up. So you guys send me a text or something and let me know that the live is ready to go over there. Okay. So now I need to keep going on this. All right. the other thing that they talked about in the meeting between President Trump and Netanyahu is one of the reporters asked about a two-state solution. Asked if asked President Trump actually, are you for a two-state solution in, uh, in Gaza, the West Bank, whatever? President Trump very wisely said, I think you should give that question to Prime Minister Netanyahu, and he threw it over to him. And Netanyahu just laid it out and said, the Palestinians don't want a two-state solution. The Palestinians want a one-state solution that doesn't include Israel. And so you're not going to look, a two-state solution is dead. It's not going to happen. It's just not, it's not in the cards. Now, before they had this meeting, just shortly before that, there's a group of IDF soldiers that is known as the Wounded Warriors Forum. And they're composed of injured IDF veterans from this war specifically after October 7th, 2023. And they published an open letter earlier today urging Prime Minister Netanyahu to reject any ceasefire deal that does not lead to absolute victory over Hamas. And they warned that, quote, any deal that returns Hamas to power or gives it breathing room is a betrayal, and explicitly called on the Prime Minister, don't bring promises, bring victory. There won't be a second chance. And let me tell you, folks, from being here in Israel, on the ground, talking to people, this is how the vast majority of Israelis feel right now. There won't be a second chance. We don't want a ceasefire. What we want is an end to the threat. It is more important for us to end the threat than it is even to get our own hostages back at this point. Again, there are only 20 hostages left, and they are all soldiers, all male. I'm not saying that they should abandon them in any sense. No way. They should go all the way to the mat to try to get them back, as long as they don't surrender to do so. Because, look, there are some people right over there in front of Benjamin Netanyahu's residence, just a couple blocks from where I'm standing, that have been out there protesting every day since the beginning of the war. Now, they were out there, to be fair, they were out there protesting something before the war even started. I mean, there's always been protesters. It's like in front of the White House. There's always protesters out there. Half of them are crazies that think the government can read their thoughts with tinfoil hats on, stuff like that. But in this case, this group of people has been out there with signs and placards and yellow chairs lined up with pictures of all the hostages. And the messaging is, bring them home now. Now, I want to just comment on that for just a second. You see that all over Israel there, because these people put graffiti up on walls and bus stops and stickers on their cars and everything that say, bring them home now. Well, my answer to that, if I was the prime minister, would be like, what do you think we're trying to do? What do you think we're just, ignoring the problem? We just lost 5 IDF troops this morning that were in Gaza doing their best to prosecute this conflict to an end and get the hostages back. That is what they are doing. But that's not what the people mean who put these stickers up and paint this all over the place. When they say bring them home now, what they, I think, mean, this is the sense I get, is what they're saying is, give in to Hamas. Give them whatever they ask for, as long as they promise to give our hostages back. Well, let me explain to you why that's a really bad idea. Number one, all you're doing is you would, if you were to do that, if you give in to Hamas and just say, we'll do whatever you ask, just give us our hostages back. Number one, you're not going to get all of them back, because the hostages are the only leverage Hamas has. And so they're never going to give all of them up unless they're forced to. So then, you could ask those people who say, bring them home now, give in to Hamas, make a deal, stop fighting, stop the war. You could ask them, well, which ones of the hostages that are remaining, the 20 that are remaining, which ones of those would you like to see stay in Gaza for the next 10 years? Because Hamas will not give them all up unless they're forced to do so. And this is where you get this sense that there's a small group of people here in Israel who they don't like reality, the reality that Hamas is not reasonable and they're not going to give all the hostages back alive unless they're forced to do so. They just don't like that reality. And so they're just saying, we have to, if we believe hard enough, we can make another reality. Well, no, you can't. You're not going to make another reality out of that. The reality is that there's a very good chance that unless, they come up with some temporary ceasefire deal, because Israel is not going to agree to end the war, even in exchange for the remaining living hostages. As long as Hamas is still in power, if those people get their way that want to just bring them home now, then they are guaranteeing that someone else's kids will be taken hostage in the future, because that's what Hamas does. Hamas is going to continue to try to kill Israelis and try to take hostages as long as they exist. And so Israel is going to have to, if they really want to end the threat, then they're going to have to say something more along the lines of, you know what, keep those 20 hostages and we'll just keep killing you until there's nobody left to take hostages anymore. That's a tall order. That's a difficult, it's a hard thing to do. But I think it's disingenuous for people to just act like, oh, all we have to do is just bring them home. Like Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't want to bring them home. You know what that sounds like? That sounds like the Iranian propaganda that was put out during this Tucker Carlson interview, because the Iranian president kept saying, he kept using the same term over and over again, forever wars. Oh, Netanyahu just wants a forever war. No, he doesn't. Nobody wants a forever war. But there are some wars that are worth fighting. And if they are worth fighting, then they're worth winning and doing what you have to do to win. That's my opinion on that. All right. I'm going to go over and start the live at the Hot Zone on my own channel. So if you have questions, we've been taking note of all your questions. We're going to go over there and I'm going to start answering your questions over there. We can have more discussion there on the Hot Zone. So give me 2 minutes to get all my technology switched around and I'll be over there in just a second. But I hope you'll go over to the Hot Zone. And meanwhile, make sure that you're subscribed to CBN News and to the Hot Zone as well. I'll see you in just a minute. Take care.